Today I'm going to be painting a countryside scene with a simple background, mountains, a bunch of fields and some rivers running through it. There's quite a lot of green in this painting, which can be quite tricky. So stick around and I'll explain how it went as I paint. So first of all, I'm going to block out all the big shapes. I'll be using the color fill tool in Procreate to do this. I prefer to do this because it's a lot faster and you can get the basic shapes and colors down really quickly, and if you get them wrong, they're quite easy to change with the transform tools. You won't see me use those much because I'm not too bothered if it matches the reference exactly, so if I'm a bit off, that's okay. You will notice though that the section I'm on now is on the wrong layer there, but it's actually quite a far to the left, so I will fix that in a bit. Like I said, I don't mind if it's too far off, but that one was quite a way off, so I will fix that in a minute. But the most important thing to do early on is to get the rough idea of the composition and what colors underneath you want to use. So if you look at one of the big shapes, you'll always have like sometimes it's hard to tell, but you'll have a dark, a medium, and a light. Now you want to pick the darkest one. It's easier to go from dark to light. So if you're in doubt, just go too dark, and you can lighten it up quite easily. It's hard to go the other way around. Now you won't nail it straight away, so don't worry about it as you're getting these shapes in. I think I'll find that the rivers that I got underneath are too bright there, and hopefully I darken them. It's not impossible to go backwards, but try your best not to. So once you get all these big shapes in, your painting should look pretty dark, and so we'll highlight them later. So you can see me messing around with the colors now and again. That's just using the adjustment tool in Procreate and making them darker basically. As I said earlier, I didn't get the left-hand shape far enough to the right. In the reference photo down the bottom left there, you can see that that whole section goes about to the middle, and mine is way over to the left, so it doesn't really matter, but I'll push it to the right a little bit more and a little bit more. One thing that's a good trick to do if you're having troubles putting things in the right place, as you can see, I still do. It's being lazy more than anything, is try and pick a reference point. If you're doing a square painting like I am, the reference point's quite easy. Just use the center. Once you have the center, then wherever you draw one of these big shapes, just reference to the center, and then you can't go too wrong. Clearly I didn't do that because I've gone way to the left and I should have been further out. But you can see me fixing it now, so at least I did notice at some point, and I started pushing it over. I've actually made quite a big mistake on the river as well, which I only noticed after I basically finished. So there'll be an extra 5 minutes or a few minutes at the end of this video where I take it back to a Procreate. Even after I filmed it, and I filmed another bit to fix the problem. Now, I won't try and explain that right now because it probably won't make much sense, but when I get to the end, it will. So stick around if you want to see that. And maybe you can work out now what's wrong with the river as I paint it. Because it looks okay, right? It doesn't seem wrong other than it's too bright, so hopefully I darken it at some point. So once I've done the blocking, which I have done, I start to add simple detail. Again, flat, simple detail, like it's gonna be like a flat shaded painting. So all I'm trying to do again is get the darks, and don't worry about the highlights yet. You can see sometimes I get the color fill, wrong. The tool sometimes doesn't fill in. You can just undo, or you can drag the color and drop it onto the bit where it's gone a bit wrong. So there's me messing around with the transform tool, which I said I don't do a lot, but I do sometimes. And the more you get the shapes wrong, the more you want to use it. So Play around with the transform tools and just move things into the right areas. But it's important when you do these big shapes that you put them all on separate layers so you can move them if you get them wrong. And another great thing about putting them on the layers is it's easy to get all the painting that's going to go over the top of it to conform to the layer. So you can do that by creating a new layer above it and turn clipper mask on, which means it will just conform to what is underneath. Or you can just turn alpha lock on the layer. It's on the layer settings. And you'll see me do it a bunch of times, but just click on the layer and it has a bunch of stuff that you can do. And when it's called alpha lock, either will be fine. So use whichever one you get used to. You don't have to use them. It just means it'll be easier to paint over and not go out to the lines. But sometimes you want to go out to the lines too. So if you use alpha lock, you can just turn it back off. So if you're painting on a layer and it doesn't seem to be doing anything, check your alpha lock, because I do that quite often. I generally cut them out of the videos because it's me messing around doing nothing basically. So you don't want to see that. So pretty much now I'll be starting the highlights, and you can see me messing around with and trying to find the right colors. So it's kind of scribbly because I'm looking for the right colors first, and it'll take me a few goes to get the right colors. And you can see I've changed them again, and I change them quite often, and then I'm back to the color fill, and sometimes it gets stuck, as you can see there. Sometimes I'll be using the technical pen brush, as you can see now, and sometimes I'll use the color fill tool. There is a simple reason I flip between one or the other, and small little detail is hard to do with the color fill, and it's easier with the little brush. Now, I've only used one brush for this entire painting, and it's the technical pen, which comes with Procreate. But you can use any brush, but I suggest that you use a hard brush and not a soft brush. When I get to smoothing things out, I'll explain why. But you don't want too many soft edges in your painting, and it's easier to soften hard edges rather than harden soft edges. And you can be quite scribbly. So here we go. I've started smoothing some things out. So I'm using the Smudge tool. I think it's called Smudge. The one with the little finger in Procreate pointing down. And so basically I just scribble the colors that I want and then smooth it in. Now you got to be careful not to smooth everything. So once I smooth something, I'll go back over it with the hard pen. So I'll flip between the two and make sure I've got a nice mix between the soft ones and the hard edges. You might be tempted to soften everything, so definitely do not do that, because it'll look like everything's out of focus. So I'm gonna do this quite a lot now, but I'll flip between both. So you can see I'm flipping back to the color fill too, and I had alpha lock on. So that's why I didn't do anything. Like I said, sometimes you forget what's on. So you go back and turn her off. So I'll flip between, depending on how big it is. If the shape's big, then I'll use the color fill. If the shape's small, I'll use the technical pen. And then I'll go to the smudge tool if I want to soften something. So water is very soft. So if you want the soft edges, I'd still advise you to use the hard edge brush, because you want a mix of soft and hard edges. Now that's really difficult to do if you're going to use the soft brush. Because if you look in the reference photo, I know it's quite small, you can see there's still parts of the river that are quite sharp. So you want to leave some of those. Okay, so I'm back to the scribbling and the smudging. I've only started doing that recently. I mean, I've done it many times before in different ways, but the smudge tool on Procreate is really good. What you want so you can pick a brush when you use the smudge tool, and I've got a soft round brush, so it's just like an airbrush, and that will make the transition smoother. But you want to make sure for your smudge tool that you put the slider, the opacity slider, down to about midway or even less, because the smudge is too powerful otherwise, and it'll smudge everything. I'd rather use the smudge tool a bunch of times softly rather than one big one, because otherwise it pushes it too far and too much, and then it's really pushing things around where I want it to blend, not push. So I put it around halfway, and I press quite lightly when I'm smudging. Sometimes you can use it to move things around, which I will do from time to time, which is quite interesting as well. But because I paint on one layer, and I usually make sure it doesn't go out of the lines, you can't do too much of that. So I'm doing the background mountain now. At the moment, it's probably too grey. It should be darker and more blue, which is easy to see now as I'm watching back. But as I'm doing it, it's quite hard to notice as you're doing it. But you can see I'm playing around with it now, so you can tell I've noticed. It's probably too dark now. But too dark's good, because you're probably going to lighten it up later. So the dark one I had a couple of seconds ago, I probably should have left, to be honest. I'm watching this back now, and I'm watching the video that you're watching. So it's, in hindsight, it's quite easy. But one trick to blend in your mountains to the sky is just pick a sky color, scribble her in, and then use the smudge tool to kind of blend it in. Now this will get better over time. It's not going to end up like that exactly, but I just want to soften the edges. With mountains, this far away anyway, if mountains are close, it's a little bit different, but if they're really far away, they'll have more of the atmosphere around the edges and things, so it'll make it look more interesting. Here I've got some of the background a bit too dark, so if you get a background too dark, you'll have a problem with depth, and it will look like it's all on the same level. So I'm lightening it up a little bit so we get a bit more depth, or hopefully anyway. You gotta have a bit of faith sometimes that it's gonna turn out okay at the end, because you know it probably still looks a bit of a mess right now, but it's a process, and you know it's. I've done so many of these now, I don't really worry what it looks like. So this took me an hour. So I'm about 12 minutes in, which would be about, I guess this is nearly halfway. But the paint is not going to look anything like it does at halfway, so you kind of just got to keep on going. You got to know when to stop as well. I mean, for most people, I probably stop too early, but I prefer to do many paintings rather than spend 4 or 5 hours on one. Plus, I get bored anyway, and well, maybe not bored. I just I find just working on more paintings just more interesting. You can learn a lot more. Maybe I'll slow down eventually when I'm getting to how I want them to look, and I got lots of practice. I'm trying to paint 100 of these, and I think this is number 12. So they're all going to be roughly the same, all using my iPad, all using Procreate. They're all square, so I'm trying to just do loads of roughly the same thing. And at the end of that, you know, maybe I'll slow down, or maybe not, it doesn't really matter. So I'm still basically doing the same thing. I'm reshaping where it doesn't quite look right, and then I'm putting highlights on top. Again, I fiddle around with the colors to try and get the right colors of the trees. Some variation is quite nice as well. I'm quite careful when we do lots of greens is to not pick the greens from another part of the painting, or you end up with the same greens. Now that's not good, because in reality, when you look at these photos, or any photo with green in it, I probably haven't done this enough in this painting, is there's actually lots of browns and kind of bluey greens and orangey greens. So you don't see so much of the color if you're zoomed out like this, because the color's subtle. So when it's a big mass, you only see the generic color anyway. So it's not such a big deal as we're so zoomed out. but try and get a variation of greens. Now, greens can be very difficult, and I've done lots of studies with greens, so there are only really two greens you want to worry about. Is if you look at your color palette, color wheel thing, sorry, there's like really horrible green in the middle, and you want to avoid that green. So there's only really two greens you're interested in. It's the ones that go towards the yellow and then to the orange and to the red. So you start your green and move the slider towards the yellow. So that'll be one part of your green, which is mostly in this painting. And then you want to push it to the other side, which it goes to blue. And that will be your background greens, because the yellow gets removed and you end up with the bluey green. So just avoid the green kind of right in the middle, because that just does not happen in nature. It's just a weird green that the only really time it happens is man-made things. So avoid the middle green, which is absolutely horrible anyway. And then you'll be okay. And if you want realism, you want to desaturate it. So that means taking the color out and making it more gray, basically. So depending on how realistic you want to go, most of the greens in real life are kind of gray. Kind of depends how sunny it is. If the day is really sunny, then it's more saturated. And so this is fairly sunny-ish, and it's obviously summer or spring or something. And most of the time it wouldn't really look like this. If you have a real photo, it would be a lot more grey. But I tend to paint slightly more unrealistic fantasy type paintings, so I go a bit more saturated, and I'm not too bothered about making it realistic. Realistic to the point you can tell what it is, but not matching the colours. Although for once in this painting, I get to the end and I realise I haven't actually saturated as much as I usually do. And I could have probably gone even further and made it more colourful. So that's new for me. I suspect I'll go back to too colourful at some point. Just one thing to note. Obviously, if you look at the reference photo down the bottom, it has these pink field flower thingies in there. I didn't think it really fit the painting, so I just left them out. You could do them. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them. But they're kind of in the wrong place anyway. I mean, how would they be there? This reference is kind of nonsense, but that's fine. I don't really use it for the detail. I just want a guide of where to put things. One thing I should be talking about this river, actually, because rivers are really difficult. I think rivers are easier when you're zoomed in. When you're zoomed out, I don't even know how to make this right. So what I do is I just put various different shades of, okay, it's dark there. So let's scribble some dark and then push it around with the smudge tool. But what I'm doing is trying to make sure that the edges go dark where the sun is getting blocked by the banks. And then what you want to do is you want to put the colors that are around the river into it, but very subtle. So scribble some of the greens into them and then push them around, because the water will reflect some of the environment color. But if it's fast flowing, it won't reflect that much, but you want to just put some of it in, so it looks like it belongs. So the water is never really blue, unless it's very still. It's just kind of the environment and what's underneath it, which is generally just dark mud, greens, etc. So yeah, I know that might not be that helpful, but just realize that water is a lot darker than you think it is most of the time. So most people tend to paint it too bright. Now, if you go too dark, that's okay. We can just put some reflections on top. But if you look in real life, most rivers and streams and things like that are really, really dark. Depending on where you are and the time of day, etc., sometimes they're just black, right? So you can't really go too dark. So if you go too dark, we can put some reflections on the top, and then it'll look pretty good anyway. But if you go light, like most people do, and they make it super blue, because they think water is blue, which is not, then there's not really any fixing that. So if you want to be cautious, just go dark. Just go really dark blue, which is, it's not that blue. If you look at the reference, it's actually dark gray-ish, so with a hint of blue. So don't try to copy the reference photo though. I don't do that. What I'm thinking is, if I look at the reference photo, the bottom left section of the water is dark. So I just make sure that's all dark, and then it gets lighter as it goes into the horizon. And that's basically all I copy off that. And then I'll put some of the reflections, which are just basically little scribbles. It's nothing more than little scribbles, to be honest. And where the water hits the bank, and it'll make a little ripple. That's kind of all you need. You don't want to go overboard. And then we can smudge them in if we need to sometimes, not often. But I still have a major mistake on this river. So we got about maybe 10 minutes left, and then I'll show you where this mistake is. Maybe you've spotted it already. I'm not sure if it makes a huge difference, but the way I'm painting on this angle doesn't help. So I'll stick a screenshot of both of them, or the finished one, in a minute, and I'll point out to you. Now, I haven't made this mistake for a long time, and I'm not sure why I did. So it doesn't really matter how many of these you painted. It's you still make the same mistakes if you're not careful. So that's how I do highlights there. I scribble them in, and make sure it's not white, because it's actually dark bluey grey color. It might look white, but it's not, because it only does that because it's contrasting what's underneath. But you notice I don't smudge it all. You got to leave some that it's still sharp, because the water kind of hits rocks and things. And when it hits a rock, it'll stay sharp. It'll stay very sharp. So you just want a nice mix of sharp and soft. And it doesn't really matter, where or how. I'm not copying the reference to do those little bits. I'm just making sure I got enough sharp edges and enough soft edges to make it look like it's hitting things and not hitting things. So don't try and copy those. It's not really possible. So we're on to the clouds. I'm not a big fan of clouds. They annoy me. They are quite hard to paint. I got a fairly simple style of painting them. Make sure they're horizontal to the ground, because they weren't, and they will look funny if you don't. So all I really do is a fairly simple process of, I'll block in the shadow side of them, and using the color fill, we're back to the color fill now because they're big shapes. And I just make sure there's enough dark parts to leave that there's a shadow. So then I'll be back to the smudge tool. It'll look a little bit messy at the moment, but it'll tidy itself up in a little bit. Again, I'm not really copying the reference here. I can't stand copying clouds because there's just too much detail in them, and it's really annoying. So be mindful here that you notice when I'm smudging, it's not going out of the lines. That's because I have alpha lock turned on the layer. So make sure you do that, or it'll smudge all over the place. So then I'll tidy up a little bit with that technical pen a bit. Like I said, for nearly everything, you need a mix of soft and hard edges, and clouds are the same. So you'll see me smoothing some of it, but not all of it. I got to be honest, I don't like painting clouds, so I am a little bit messy with them. I should pay attention, and I should go slower. But I think everybody, likes painting certain things and doesn't like painting other things. And clouds are my nemesis, I think. So on the shadow side of these clouds, I grab some of the sky color, scribble some of it in, and then push it into the shadow. So you get some nice reflections from the sky getting into the shadow. Just a nice little trick. The same as the rivers and water that take in the colors from around wherever they are, like the fields or whatever. The sky can be reflected into the clouds themselves too. So it just makes everything kind of come together. So now I've turned alpha lock off and I'm using a technical pen and add in some details. And then I'll smudge the edges of the clouds. But be very careful if you do this, that you only want to smudge some of it, not all of it. It's not all soft. So sometimes the cloud kind of breaks off, but sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes it is very, very sharp, basically, and sometimes it isn't. It's always kind of soft down the bottom. You can always kind of do that. And then push some of these other little ones like they're breaking up. And yeah, so I do that in a bunch of places. A mix between soft and hard edges, and push it around so it looks wispy. But I'm not that careful. So don't try and overdo this. I mean, unless you want to, but I prefer not to. So for me, it's like, do they look like clouds? Yep, job done. So for the next few minutes, I'm just messing around here, putting details here and there. Nothing fancy. It's still the technical pen. I don't even think I ever changed the size of it. It's just a medium-sized one. And usually at this point when I'm finishing off, I'm not too careful with the layers. Sometimes I'll just put a layer right on top of everything where I just add details quickly. Because at that point, if I really make a mistake on the detail layer, I can just delete it or erase it, or, the little details are not such a big deal because they're generally small anyway. And I'll add a few effects here and there, and I'll tidy up the background. You can see I'm making the fields or whatever they are up the mountain a bit more detailed. I'm just erasing some of the things to make it look like there's more going on. So you zoom out, if you look at those green bits on the mountain now, it looks like there's much more going on, but all you saw was me erasing some things and adding some more highlights and things like that. I'm not really copying the reference photo so much now. I'm just going by what I've done before and, trying to find contrasty areas. So that's one nice thing to do at the end of a painting, is to look for contrasty areas where it goes from white to dark and add to them a little bit. So I'm adding a few effects here. So in the background, I just put a big color fill blob of white. Then I've put Gaussian blur so it goes nice and soft and it makes kind of like a misty effect. They're quite nice to use, especially around mountains and water. That happens quite a lot where it gets foggy. So where the water evaporates and things like that. So not entirely sure what I'm doing here. Oh yeah, I'm trying to make this a path. Like a dirt path or something like that. So again, I've gone off the reference photo, so I've turned it off. So it will be confusing. But you can see everything I do is quite scribbly when you zoomed in. That's on purpose because I only want to spend about an hour on my painting. So if I was careful in one area, then I'd have to be careful everywhere. And then that would mean a 2-hour paint, or 3 hours, 4 hours, or whatever. And which is fine, but I'd rather just play around for an hour and see where I go. I mean, if I really enjoyed it, I could obviously carry on. But I don't think it'd be very interesting to watch either, because you'd have to be very, careful about everything. And this video would be way too long anyway. So I think an hour is good for me. So I'm just about finishing off here, not doing anything major. I'm adding variations of greens, by the way. So color pick the green that you want, shift it a tiny bit, and then push it around, and you can get variations of greens, which add quite a lot to it. And I could have maybe done it a bit more, but make sure you're very subtle with that, because it doesn't change that much on the same area. So that's about it. Like and subscribe if you like this kind of thing. But now I'm gonna explain what I did wrong with the river here. It's quite a bad mistake, and I shouldn't have done it. Okay, so here is the kind of finished painting. So the major problem is the river. It angles too much down at the back. So where it comes behind that cliff mountain thingy, it kind of looks like it's flowing down like downhill. Probably not the end of the world, but I wanted to fix it. So I picked the area and just transformed it and pushed it all up so it's a bit flatter. Now it gives me the opportunity to show you how quite easy it is to manipulate the painting after you've finished and join it back up quite easily. So all I'm really doing is not very carefully blasting in a load of the colors that I already have. So color pick everything. Now it's important to color pick. You don't want to try and choose your colors there because it has to blend in. But I'm doing this very messily and just trying to just fill in the shape basically. But I'll smooth this out and tidy it up as I go. But you can see it's pretty much done there. It's already filled in the gaps, and you can add some more textures or whatever. I spend a bit more time on this field here, just tidying up a little bit. Although tidying is relative, it's clearly not tidy still, but you get my point. So it's the same technique though. I'm using the technical pen just to get the color in, and then I'm using the smudge tool if I want some of it to blend in a little bit. But again, make sure it's only some, not all of it. But that's the mistake. Make sure when you use water anywhere that it's horizontal, and use a rectangle tool is your best idea, and then make sure it goes parallel or horizontal to the ground at least. So I'm going to show you both of them now and next to each other, so hopefully it'll make a bit more sense of the difference. Now, it's probably not the end of the world if you make a mistake like that. Probably not in this painting anyway, because it probably could go downhill a little bit. But be careful with lakes and flat bits of water, because that's a lot worse, because it couldn't do that. So see, the one on the left obviously is kind of going downhill, and it's more settled on the right. So hopefully that makes sense. So that's it. Again, subscribe. It would be great. It helps me a lot, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.